Welcome to the Money, Mindset and Business podcast, where we talk about all things money, mindset and business with real life stories and real life people. Let's get into the episode. Hi, and welcome to the Money, Mindset and Business podcast. Today we're talking to Marie, and she's going to talk to us about trauma in the workplace and how that causes issues in our life and in our possibly in our business. So, Marie, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you very much, Leah. How are you doing today?
Bit warm, but I'm all right. So, do you want to share with the audience what it is that you actually do? What is your business?
So my business is We Restore Calm, which is one of those names that I've sat there one day thinking, what do I do? And what I do is I restore calm to people. So essentially that's where that's come from. I have a real passion for supporting anybody's well-being where their well-being is being affected by work relationships, personal relationships as well, and also situations where people actually feel traumatized by some of the experience they've had in the workplace. So I'm primarily a sort of a trauma-informed coach, mediator, trainer, pretty much anything in that remit. But the story of We Restore Calm started 30 years ago, when my own mental health as a child was not great. And I spent a good 10 years feeling very alone, not understanding what was going on in my head, not understanding kind of why my brain was doing different things to other people. I've since found out I'm also neurodiverse as well, but I didn't know that at the time. And I was traumatized at quite a young age. So my entire life has been informed by trauma. I've also been in a situation where I care for somebody with severe mental health problems as well. So I've had my own battles, and trigger warning, I have been suicidal. My husband was suicidal as well, so I was caring for him. That was quite traumatic for me, as well as traumatic for him going through that, and for the people that he worked with. And also in the kind of work that I do, I see so much trauma in the workplace, either because people have dealt with that outside of work, so they've got stuff going on outside of work, like the mediation I had a couple of weeks ago, where the lady had PTSD because of an out of work situation, but it was affecting her work. But people can also be traumatized by relationships at work as well, and we don't talk enough about that, that they can leave a mark. I went on a trauma-informed course about 6 weeks ago, just to upskill myself a little bit more. And he started the day by saying everybody's traumatized. It just differs from person to person what degree that trauma lives with us. And that's kind of stuck in my head ever since. So in a nutshell, that's why I do what I do.
Awesome. It's very a hot topic. There's lots of people that I've spoken to that have had some form of trauma that's either gone into the workplace or that has been created in the workplace, myself included. So what is it that got you into what it is that you're physically doing now? Why did you decide to create a business from this side of things?
So I worked for a public sector organisation for 17 years before I set up my own business. And the reason I left is because I didn't feel I could bring my whole self to work. So I felt that I had to hide my trauma, my mental health, my neurodiversity. Not particularly because any behaviours made me feel that way, but the culture just was not conducive to encouraging people to bring their whole selves to work. And after 17 years, it just became exhausting having two versions of myself, having the version at home that is free to let that trauma out, and having the version at work that Marie, no, she's just a clean sheet of paper every time she comes in every morning. And there are so many organisations out there, both small, medium, large, no matter what size the organisation is, where we actually forget we're working with human beings. And it's that really set me off. So when I left the organisation I worked for in 2019, when I set up my own business, my priority, my background's HR, my priority was to put the human back into HR. And it's kind of developed from there. He's had all sorts of bells and whistles added onto it since. But that was the reason why I I've gone down the path that I've gone in my own business, just because we forget, we're human beings. We're not human doings.
Yeah.
We're not there to perform a load of tasks all day. Actually, we bring a personality, we bring stuff with us, and that does get forgotten.
Yeah. So thinking about back to before you left, and there was two Maries.
Yes.
What was that? What was the impact of you basically changing who you are to go to work every day? What was the physical, mental, emotional impact of that on you?
I was constantly in overwhelm, constantly in burnout. I was putting in 8 hours a day, but I pretty much convinced I wasn't doing 8 hours work. There were parts of my job that I loved, parts of my job that I dreaded. But I got to a point about 6 months before I left where I just didn't feel anything for the job anymore. I didn't feel sad, I didn't feel angry, I didn't feel happy, I just felt numb. And that actually was quite a scary thought because I literally thought I was just going through the motions. So years of overwhelming my mind and my body in terms of trying to be those two very, very different people was hard work. I was in a male dominated environment as well, which really, really does not help your mental well-being when you're a woman. And you're going through women's stuff as well at the same time, which I'm sure we'll come to. But yeah, it was unnecessary hard work, unnecessary.
Yeah. So would you say that you basically you reached your capacity and you just shut down?
I think I'd blown past that capacity actually, and just kept on going to a point where my brain just went, you know what, you passed your capacity about 10 years ago. No, I'm just going to stop now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm a very visual person, and I can see kind of in my mind what that would look like for me, and it would be literally just emotionless, going through the motions and doing what I need to do.
Yeah.
Until I finish work, and then I can.
Yeah.
It sounds exhausting. I'm exhausted just thinking about it.
Yeah, and the getting home as well, and all of a sudden allowing those emotions back in, and allowing myself to feel those emotions. So I was overwhelmed at work trying to hide them, and then the first half hour when I used to come home from work, it used to be a case saying to my husband, "Do not speak to me. I just need half an hour just to recalibrate myself, almost."
Kind of like decompress.
Yeah.
As such.
Yeah.
Kind of take off the mask.
Several masks. Yes.
Yeah. So when you decided to leave, what was the kind of catalyst? Would you say that was like, right, this is enough is enough. It needs to change. What was it?
Yeah, so like all big civil service type organisations, public sector organisations, we were going through yet another restructure, and I think it must have been about my 8th or 9th in the whole time that I've been there. And I just looked at my husband, and I looked at the job description that I was told that I had to apply for, and I just kind of looked at it and I just went, no, I don't want to do any of those jobs. So there was a little tick box for voluntary redundancy. So I ticked that, and I never, ever in a million years thought that that was what I would do. But best decision I ever made.
Awesome. So you started your business 2019, did you say?
Yes, 1st of September 2019. So my baby's 4 years old.
Awesome. That's exciting. That is. How did you find it when you started the entrepreneurial journey? Because obviously being an employee,
yeah,
get given tasks,
yeah,
and you've got your specific barriers. This is your job, this is what you do.
yeah,
you get here from there to there, you get paid this much money to do these jobs. We both know, being an entrepreneur, that is not the case.
no.
So how did you transition into being an entrepreneur? Because obviously it's a completely different ball game.
It is totally. I have to say, I probably spent the first 3 months in a state of terror most mornings, just purely because I'm like, what am I doing? Do I know what I'm doing? Does anybody else care what I'm doing? And sort of being stuck in that in that cycle sort of going round and round as to whether, am I talking about stuff anybody's going to be interested in? And I had I had one of those moments where I woke up one morning and I thought, you know what, I am terrified, but actually it's excited terrified, because like you say, I am quite a visual person as well, and workplaces I felt very much like swimming pool, I've stayed in my lane. And now it was a case of I don't actually have to stay in those lanes anymore. I can go and swim in the kids' pool. I can go and do I can go down the slide. I can do other stuff instead. And it took me about 3 months for my brain to kind of let go of the transactional nature of what workplaces are usually, and kind of go, you know what, I can wake up in the morning and do absolutely what I want to do, instead of feeling like I've got to do a certain kind of work. So I started off as an HR consultancy, and within 3 months I'd actually let go a lot of that HR stuff, because I realised I didn't have to do it anymore.
Yeah. Was it, I mean, it sounds very similar to my journey, that I started my first initial business as an accountancy practice because I'm an accountant.
Yeah.
And I felt like I should.
Yes.
This is what I should be doing.
Yeah.
And the worst thing that we could ever do is should ourselves.
Yes. Shoulditis.
Yeah. And as soon as we should ourselves, we realise that we've actually created another job for ourselves, that not only is the tasks in hand, but also all of the other stuff that goes with being a business owner. And you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, and I must admit, I got asked. I went to a conference a few months ago, and one of the presenters at the conference started off with the line, "Are you do you run a business or do you run a job?" And that's another phrase that's kind of stuck in my head ever since, because I do feel there are days where I am running a job, and that's a hard thing to sort of stomach, because as a business owner, you've got to make sure your accounts are up to date, you've got to make sure that all your legal stuff is done, and you've got to make sure your antivirus is working and GDPR and all that sort of stuff. So you've got the stuff that you should be doing, that you are expected to do. But actually, that's only a very small part now of what I do. Yeah, it's, and where I can, I have tried to. My husband's part of the business as well, so I try and push it in his direction.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'd like your opinion on this. It's like when you're in a profession such as HR, accountancy, no matter how much you take yourself out of that profession, the learnings, everything that goes with it stays. Yes. So you talking about having GDPR, legalities and all that in place says to me that's the HR part of you.
Yes.
Going, well, I need these in place because I'm HR and this is what I need to do.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I recognise that so much, because being an accountant, obviously, finance, and there's a lot of crossover with HR and accounts in terms of understanding what needs to be in place for a business. So I'm exactly the same. Like, I've got all the legal documents in place and all this sort of stuff, because I know those are things that I should and need.
Yes.
To have in place as a business owner. So I love that.
There is a difference though between I should have these because actually there's a legal requirement to have them, and I should have these because, well, it's what I've always done.
Oh yeah,
that's been a really interesting transition to move. It's what I call shoulditis. You don't I should be doing those, but do I want to? No, I'm not going to do them.
Yeah, I mean, I at one point I joined a legal academy, and they were talking about employment contracts, and I was like, should I have them? I don't want an employee. Why do I need employment contracts?
Exactly.
Why do I need to spend time creating an employment contract when I'm not interested in having employees?
Absolutely.
So
it's nice to let that stuff go, that you don't actually have to have that stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes a lot of conviction in yourself and knowing, okay, everybody else is telling me that I need this, and believing in yourself to say, actually, do I physically need this? Is it worth the time, the effort, the money? to actually put it in place? Is it something I physically need? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Regardless of what anybody else is telling you, because you're getting, especially online, getting shouted at by all directions. You need this, you need this, you need this. It's going, shh, do I need it? Don't care what you say over here. Do I need it? Yes or no? I mean, how do you kind of cope with that on the neurodiverse point of view? Because online is noisy, and I find it overwhelming. All of the noise, the constant rah rah rah. You need this. You need this. So how do you cope with that? I'm curious.
So it's a really, really difficult challenge. And to be fair, I've only been diagnosed in the last year. So for a long time, I sort of couldn't understand. I couldn't understand why my brain was doing what it was doing. So I've been diagnosed with ADHD, which is great in some respects. It's a nice little superpower to have, because when I get into hyperfocus, I can't half churn some work out. The problem I've got though is social media is a massive rabbit hole for me. And I get distracted by the shiny. So when you see those adverts that say you need this because it'll revolutionize your life and you'll get 50,000 clients in the next 10 minutes, I go, oh, okay. So I have to work really hard to kind of go, actually, Marie, that's not actually what they're selling. They're selling something else, and no, stay away from it. You know, you've got other avenues where you get that support. You're already paying for this thing over here, which does the same thing. You don't need new shiny stuff. So it can become really overwhelming, and I have to be very conscious of my thought patterns. So when I'm on social media, when I'm on the internet, I have to try and get into a space where I'm mindful about what I'm actually doing, as opposed to other people that could probably pick up the phone, scroll for 20 minutes and then put it back down again. I find 4 hours later, oh my God, I have to put that down because I'm on a meeting in 10 minutes that I'm not prepared for. That's my world. So I have to be very mindful. I have to be very conscious when I go on social media. I can't passively look at social media. I have to focus, which is, that's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, I can imagine. I have a love-hate relationship with social media myself because I find it very noisy, very loud, very in your face.
Yeah.
However, I do like seeing what other people are up to.
Yeah.
These are people I've met through being in business, family members. So I like to be on there to see what's going on.
Yeah.
But I also find it very overwhelming at times with all of the sales pitches and adverts, and have £1 million in your bank, like you say, in 5 minutes. Just follow this formula. It'll only cost you £3 million, and here you go.
Yeah, it's not great. And the other thing that I've had to work very hard on, and it is something that actually comes through in my coaching and my training, is that social media, the internet is a highlight reel. You never see people's true lives, whether it's business related or personal related. You know, I was talking to a colleague, somebody I'm connected with on LinkedIn. We were having a virtual coffee, as you do, and we were talking about when we first met that we were very much in competition, and every time I posted, she was like, "Oh God, I haven't done that," and that comparisonitis.
Yeah.
And she would post something, "Oh God, I haven't done that." And you get stuck in that loop. But what we don't realize is actually the hours of work, particularly for business owners on social media, the hours of work that have gone into that one post. So that's something else as well. I mean, obviously it affects our mental well-being when we're on social media, which is one of the reasons why I talk about it so much. But we do need to recognize that what we see in one post is not the whole story, regardless whether it's a sales pitch, whether it's a business, an entrepreneur posting, or whether it's your schoolmate that you haven't seen in 20 years posting about the kids. Doesn't matter who it is, it's still a highlight.
Yeah, definitely. So bringing it back to your business and what it is that you do, explaining to somebody who may not understand what trauma-informed coaching is.
Yeah.
What does that? How would you explain it?
So the work that I do focuses on people who are struggling with overwhelm, burnout, or have been traumatized either at home or at work, who are struggling to understand why their brain isn't maybe operating the way it might have done previously, who are stuck in one of the 4F responses, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, who are stuck very much in that I don't know where to turn. I've tried to contact the NHS, I've tried to get support here, I've tried to do that. And actually, we all know what NHS waiting lists are like at the moment, bless them. Trying to get help from anywhere is really, really difficult. So I'm not a counsellor. I cannot deal with past issues. But what I can do is I can support people to understand what's going on for them mentally right now and help them work through that in a way that means that they can be productive, motivated, and engaged again in what they do.
Yeah.
So that's essentially what it is. It also gives space as well, particularly for workplace trauma. One of the other things I do is coach and mediate in workplaces. It gives people in workplaces that outlet to talk about what's going on for them without worrying about it going back to HR, without it worrying about going to their line manager. So I create psychologically safe spaces to allow those stories to come out.
Okay. So if you could give some examples of what it is that looks like in your world, obviously no names, no nothing.
Yeah.
What would a typical client come to you with at any point?
So I get a wide range of clients. I get those that like the mediation that I mentioned earlier on, where the lady came into the mediation with a recent diagnosis of acute PTSD, not work related, but it was massively affecting her at work. And that was all about psychoeducation, helping her understand that she wasn't going mad. Because that's what her first words were, I think I'm going mad. And it was a case of, no, let's talk about what's going on. Let's explain why the brain is doing what it's doing, which is then informing your emotions and your actions. So that's kind of at the extreme level, that really, really acute PTSD. What I do quite often get are people who are dealing with overwhelm and burnout because they just do not stop. So not trauma as such, but it can leave feelings of trauma in the body because our bodies feel every thought that we think. So if we're constantly going, oh God, I'm tired, I'm stressed, I can't deal with this, our bodies go, oh, we're tired and stressed, are we? Okay, we're going to make ourselves feel like we're tired and stressed. So when people come to see me, they quite often come in, their shoulders are either up around their ears, like shoulders for earrings, or they're that low on the ground and hunched over because they're just under the weight of everything that's happening to them. And what I do is I help them unpick all of that. I help them work through kind of what that means for them in terms of their thought processes, but I also reconnect the mind and the body. So it's not just about, oh, let's analyze your thoughts and see how that works for you. It's about helping people understand as well that every thought that goes through our heads, our body feels. So what we have to do is close off those neural pathways that have made us feel that way and actually generate some new ones. And that isn't through toxic positivity, fake it till you make it type of stuff. This is stuff that really does stick. So I do work with imposter syndrome as well. This is stuff that really does stick for people because it's not just a case of, oh, I'm okay now. It's a case of I've made changes that mean I am genuinely okay again. And it helps them back on their way again. So both ends of the scale, really, really traumatized people, but also people that are just like, you know what, I just need an outlet just to go there at people.
Yeah, I can completely understand it. I think I've been through both sides of it. Kind of a bit of a story about me. When I first met my husband, we were like marriage kids.
Mm-hmm.
Tried to have kids, couldn't have kids, wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up going to see a fertility doctor who told me I had endometriosis.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the hell? But obviously, learning all of this, the stress of not being able to get pregnant, it was affecting me inside and outside of work.
Absolutely.
So I had to go and explain this to my boss, because I was like, well, this is what's going on. I need to tell you about it. I'm having all these investigations done, and I'm probably going to have an operation, which is going to mean some time off.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, my work were very, they like you to talk. They were a family-run business, and they were like, thanks for letting me know.
Brilliant.
So they were really supportive. Like, they gave me the time off. I had the operation. But I know a lot of workplaces aren't like that. And to openly have a conversation to say, look, this is what I'm trying to do, especially being a female at the age I was, I'm of that child rearing age, and saying to my boss, I'm trying to have a child, I can't, and this is what's going on.
Yep.
And there was a worry there as well. Is he going to stop trying to nurture me as an employee, knowing that I'm going to be going on maternity leave?
Yeah.
Which is not an issue that men have to worry about a lot of the time, because it's predominantly, generally, the women that, I won't say have the children, because men can't have children, but rear the children once they're born. Because a woman have to have a child. That's just how it works. Yeah. But predominantly it's the women that rear the child. So they take 6 weeks, 6 months, 12 months, 9 months off work, which is a massive gap. And yeah, so I mean, I've had 2 kids, and what happened kind of post maternity leave, even though I'd been at the company for a very long time, when I came back, I felt like a stranger.
Yeah.
And I mean, before I had my first child, I've been working there 8 years, so I wasn't a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
And coming back after the second child, I felt even more like a stranger.
Yeah.
And at that point, I'd been there 14 years.
Yeah.
And the relationships that I'd built were broken, and it turned very toxic for me. I remember coming back after the first day, going back after maternity leave for my second child, in tears to my husband. I was like, I just don't feel like I belong there anymore.
Yeah.
Which is one of the triggers that ended up with me leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew all the people that worked there, but I felt like they didn't give a shit about me, basically. So there was no, oh, how's your little boy? How are you getting on? Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's what a toxic workplace is.
Yeah.
I mean, having a child's traumatic in itself.
It is. Yeah, it's not always a happy event. It can be traumatic as well, definitely.
Yeah, I had a lot of PTSD after the first one, but I'm not going to go into that.
We'll save that for another day.
Yeah, that's not a topic of conversation here today. But kind of what you're talking about here in terms of the mediation in the workplace, and understanding that the life that impacts every day, it's taken me up until probably around 2 years ago, my youngest is nearly 4, to get over that situation of going back to work and not feeling like I was welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what? That's a difficult pill to swallow. When you give your, I mean, I went through very similar role at the organisation that I was at, in terms of, there were times when I didn't feel welcome, partly because I was a woman, and then partly because I was desperately trying to be who they wanted me to be, and probably not managing that because I was trying too hard to be something I wasn't. And the thing is, all this time that this is going on, you mentioned there about, that you had the stress of fertility concerns. You then had the stress of telling your organisation that you were about to go potentially on maternity leave, that you were going through all this stuff to resolve the fertility issue to then go and have a child. And then you've been off, come back, gone off, come back, all of that time, your brain, the chemistry in your brain is shifting, because every time we're stressed, adrenaline and cortisol go into our system, because they're getting us ready to run away or fight in a particular situation. Yeah, so the 4F response is triggered. And the problem is, the more often that happens, we end up in chronic stress. And as much as that chronic stress does sit in our heads, it rests more heavily in our body. There's a very good chance that a lot of what you were going through in that time was made worse because you were stuck in that chronic stress cycle.
Yeah. I mean, it manifested into back problems.
Absolutely. Yeah, musculoskeletal is the most common. Yeah, back, neck.
Neck and back problems.
Yeah.
And since leaving that toxic environment, obviously discounting the stress of starting my own business and feeling like I was in a should job and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's only now, 3 years later, without seeing physios or anything, that the impact on my physical body has lapsed.
Yeah, because your body's having to relearn or reconnect itself with your brain and relearn those neural pathways, and it does take time. What I do is I help people break that stress cycle quicker.
Yeah. I mean, if only I'd have known about you years ago.
Well, you know where I am if you want to talk about this.
But I can imagine that there's a lot of, not just women, but men as well, that have, especially when it comes to female issues around menopause, perimenopause, cycle issues, having children, the stress of having children, the stress of having to take the career breaks and all this sort of stuff. I can imagine there's so many women who need to hear and know that there's somebody out there who can help. So what have you got to say on that?
So one of the things that I'm noticing more and more actually is that those women's issues are actually creating trauma in the workplace for those women, and also for their male counterparts. But there's also the element of the transgender population within the workforce as well, which is something that doesn't get talked about enough, and how traumatic that process is without actually the actual process of transitioning, alongside actually telling the outside world that you're transitioning. So there is all sorts of stuff that goes on for people, male and female, that can certainly create that stress cycle, that ongoing chronic stress cycle in our bodies, which then makes those issues actually a lot harder to deal with. So for example, talk about periods for a second. If you're stressed, if you're a woman who is stressed, who's going through their period pain is 10 times worse, because your muscles are already tense before that cycle actually kicks in. If you're going through perimenopause, if you're going through menopause, if you're transitioning, all those, because there are so many negative hormones running around your system, and you're putting HRT, hormone replacement therapy, in to try and correct the imbalance, that correction doesn't happen in the same way as for people that aren't running a stress cycle. So there's such a massive impact just because we don't feel we can be our true selves. And that's not about turning up to work in your pajamas every day, although during COVID it was great because we could. But it's about feeling psychologically safe at work. So being able to put your head above the parapet without it being shot off, regardless of whether you're talking about menopause, transitioning, male menopause, even to a certain extent. We used to call it the midlife crisis. 50-something men going out and buying a sports car and getting a younger wife kind of thing. Well, we now see that as being those hormone changes that go on for men as well. And because men don't talk, without being stereotypical, because men do not talk, they don't talk about that stuff. So they kind of push it down and push on through anyway, which that creates a stress cycle. So when you get to sort of a certain age, or depending on what you're going through, those hormone changes can really make a mess of that mind-body link, and really create some stress cycles that are very difficult to break, because we don't actually have a huge amount of control over what goes on in terms of our hormones. So difficult situation.
That's something I'm currently investigating as well, for myself, and a potential for future clients is we can't control our hormones. Our hormones, they do stuff. That's what they're there for.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We have, especially as women, we have dips like this, and we have days where our hormones go, no, I'm not playing today. We're going into this hormone, and those are the days that I'm investigating now, where I feel my worst.
Yeah.
When we're switching from part of our cycle to the next one, and yet we're still expected to show up.
Yeah.
As if it's not happening.
Absolutely.
And that in itself is stressful. But what can we do about it? I mean, whether we're self-employed, whether we're in employment, what is it that you advise we could do?
So there's three simple things. So I've come with my 3 tips. I like things in 3. So the first one, just a reminder that our body feels every thought we think. So if we're thinking I'm tired and stressed, our bodies are going to feel weary. We're going to struggle to get out of bed. We're going to struggle. So try and get yourself to a place, not where you're pushing those negative thoughts down, but where you're thinking instead in terms of gratitude. What am I grateful for today? What is it about today that is going to fire me up? And focus on that instead. That's not pushing away the negative stuff, because that negative stuff is still going to sit there. But actually, gratitude is one of the most pure emotions that we can feel. And the more and more we feel of that gratitude, the more and more it energizes those neural pathways, which in turn will affect our brain chemistry in a positive way as opposed to in a negative way. So remembering that our body feels every thought and being gentle with those thoughts, even on our worst days, is kind of tip number 1. Number 2, grounding and meditation. I am not one of those that sits cross-legged in the middle of the floor and goes, all the time. What meditation means to me is my favourite song and just focusing on the lyrics. Sitting outside, what's 5 things I can see, 5 things I can smell, 5 things I can hear. Just going through that and bringing yourself back to the present for a second and giving your brain that peace just for a few minutes. And that's all it ever takes, is between sort of 3 and 5 minutes of actual taking the time to be present in the moment, can actually help break that stress cycle just for a second. And the more and more we do it, the easier and easier it is for us to break those stress cycles. And the third one is self-care is not selfish. I've lost count of how many times I've said that. I teach the mental health first aid course as well, and they use the analogy of when you get on an aeroplane, when the oxygen masks come down, they say put your own mask on first. Self-care is exactly the same. If we don't look after ourselves first, we cannot hope to be able to do the stuff that other people maybe do expect of us. So self-care isn't selfish. And I want everybody to throw away all those books, all those magazines about what self-care is, because the only 2 words you need to remember with self-care: does it make me happy? Does it make me feel healthy? They are the only 2 words that matter. So it doesn't matter if actually this Saturday, when it's going to be somewhere like 32 degrees in certain parts of the UK, if that means you just sit and watch Netflix all day, that makes you feel happy and healthy on that day. But actually a week on Saturday, you might decide you're going to go out for a bike ride. Yeah. It's whatever makes you feel happy and healthy on that particular day. I've been to the gym this morning. I made sure I went this morning and not this afternoon when it was a bit cooler. And don't get me wrong, it was hard work. But now I've got so many positive hormones coursing through my body because I made the effort to go out and do something that made me feel sort of happy, definitely healthy. And it's energized me for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very important point that you make there, that you have, there's a lot of people online, a lot of books you can read, that say, oh, self-care is meditation, it's this, it's that. But what is really important from what you've said there is self-care it's to do with you. It's not to do with anybody else. Like my personal idea of self-care is to sit down and watch a Netflix show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or to read a book.
Yeah.
I love meditating as well, so I do meditation.
Brilliant.
Or go for a swim.
Yeah.
going to the gym, going
Yeah.
for a walk. Just like in the morning while I'm brushing my teeth, I stand in my bedroom and I just look out the window.
Yeah.
And it's so individual to us. And yes, it's okay to get ideas from other people.
Absolutely.
Because, I'll try that, see if that feels good for me. But don't prescribe to somebody else's version of self-care.
Exactly. Yeah. Because what works for you won't work for me, and vice versa. You know, the idea of going swimming, I'd rather go lift weights in the gym, mate. But but you'll sit there and go, wait, lifting weights in the gym? No thanks. It's what makes you feel happy and healthy.
Yeah.
And that blows people's minds a little bit when I say, you know, self-care is whatever makes you feel happy and healthy. If it's sitting there, I mean, the first thing I will do after we've spoken now is I'm going to go downstairs, put the kettle on, and go and play catch with my dog.
Sounds fun. Yeah. Sounds fun. I mean, I'm going to the gym after this.
Well done.
But there's aircon in the gym, so it's actually cooler in there than it is outside. But yeah, I mean, there seems to be a lot of pressure around this self-development work. But the three things you've said there in terms of like gratitude and things, the gratitude is something I do every single day.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people, there's clients that I've worked with that struggle with gratitude.
Yeah.
So like, I have no idea what I'm grateful for. I'm like, that's fine. Start with one thing.
Yeah.
And the more you do it, the easier it gets. It's a practice.
It is, yeah. And there is a little life hack for getting into the gratitude mode. If you can't think of something you're grateful for, think of something you've done well that day. It doesn't matter whether it's you've just got out of bed or whether it's, you know what, I've landed that client today that I've been talking to for a while and they've finally signed up today. It can be as big or as small as you think it might be. I tell you now, talking to you today is going to be the thing that I've done well today.
That's awesome. Yay! I'm going to be in your gratitude. Well, you coming on and sharing your story is something I'm grateful for. I mean, I could probably go on for about 45 minutes for the things I'm grateful for just from the first few hours this morning.
Yeah.
But I've been practicing for a very long time.
Yeah. Which is why sometimes it's easier to think about one thing that you have done well that day.
Yeah.
And that leans you into the gratitude, because then you're grateful for the fact that you've been able to do that. So it still releases that same hormone in the mind, the serotonin, the dopamine, and all that sort of stuff in the brain. It still releases that, but it's less pressurized than thinking, oh, what am I grateful for today? When it ends up being every day, I'm grateful for my dog, or I'm great. You know, one thing you've done well that day is different every single day.
Yeah, I did say to one of my clients who's struggling with gratitude, I was like, there are three things that I write down every single day that I'm grateful for. And they're the same three things every single day. And that is perfectly fine to be grateful for the same thing every day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just about feeling that gratitude. Yeah. It doesn't matter what it's for, as long as you're feeling it.
Yeah. Awesome. Have you got any closing comments before we finish this call today that you want to share?
Only that I am doing a 10% back to school sale on pretty much everything that I do, whether it's mental health first aid training, refresher training, or if anybody wants to come and have a coaching session. So there's 10% off all of those using the code back to school. Also, I'm also offering a free half-hour session in the month of September if anybody just wants to come and find out more about what I do.